Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the .org Expo. Thank you all for joining us here for today's first panel. Today's topic is super special. I actually think it's perhaps the most important topic for both nonprofits and for-profits alike, which is why we'll probably be charging extra for it, because you could take this to the business world. Talent is really everything, and we're lucky today to have incredible experts here on the panel. We have Rabbi Ari Yaakov, who is the Community Dean for Values and Leadership at Yeshiva University. Rabbi Yoni Cohen, who is the Chief of Staff at the OU. Yaakov Klein, partner at Cashman Klein. And I'm going to ask each and every one of them to give a short intro about themselves and their history and the work that they do today. And we'll start with Rabbi Ari Yaakov.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you, Yisrael. Good to be with my fellow panelists. I serve as a community dean at Yeshiva University. Today's topic, as introduced, is my life's passion. Talent is not a function. Talent is a strategy. Talent is about everything that we do as nonprofits. We don't have products. Anyone can sell an iPhone. We sell values. We sell ideas. And it's only as good as the people that we're with. So it's an honor to be here and looking forward to a conversation.
Well said, Ari. I guess before we start, I want to just shout out that anyone who walks in through the door outside into our session in the next 1 second gets $1,000 from the OU. Okay, that didn't work so much. Yoni Cohen, I'm the Chief of Staff.
Session. Huh? It's not a fundraising session.
It's not a fundraising session. Shoot, that's later on. My name is Yoni Cohen. I'm the Chief of Staff of the OU, really oversee a lot of the organization that we have today. To me, this is a very passionate topic because your biggest asset in any organization is your people. And the more you invest in your people and the more you get the right people into the organization, the better the life is for management and leadership. And it's a very tricky way to think about it because you have different types of people, different types of positions. And there needs to be a strategy and a thought process to it. So I hope we discuss that today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Yisrael. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yaakov Klein. I own and run a company with my business partner called Cashman Klein. It's a management consulting company. We do leadership development, executive coaching, process improvement, team dynamics, and organizational culture. I've been very fortunate to get to know our fellow panelists, and this topic is what I do full-time. Before running my own company, I was the assistant director and led the team that does this at Mount Sinai Health System in New York City. We work with profit and non-for-profit companies.
Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And again, thank you to our wonderful crowd. So let's kick off with what I think is obviously an intro to today's topic. How do you identify potential talent? So a question, and we'll start with you, Rabbi Yaakov. How do you spot a potential leader, whether within the organization or someone that you're seeing maybe in a first interview?
So my approach to this question is I always focus on values first, skills, competencies, resumes second. I have 4 core values that I look for. I'll share them with you. You can all come up with your own. I look for conscientiousness. You could usually tell that right away. Are they on top of their game? Do they get back to you? Number 2 is I look for someone who's curious. You know, are they asking questions, lifelong learning. Number 3 is I look for people who understand relationships. I think relationships is key in nonprofit specifically, and can they really lead into that? And the last, which I stole from Google, by the way, is humble confidence. Humility is the domain of Moshe Rabbeinu. Confidence and cockiness is not something that we put on a pedestal. It's the combination of the two. Values over competencies. Competencies come second.
Rabbi Yoni?
Yeah, totally agree with Ari. I would just add to that don't skip that step. You have to identify the values that you yourself and the organization stand for. No one is coming into the nonprofit world to make a lot of money. I think we all know that. And yeah, money plays a role later on with compensation conversations and things like that. But people who are coming into our line of work across the board, whether you're a school, a nonprofit organization, the OU, YU, doesn't matter who you are, they're coming because they want something more from life than just making a lot of money. And identify your values, and then you have to just really stick to it. Another point that I would just add to that is many times I find that I used to look for unicorns. And what I mean by that is the perfect employee. They have to be good at everything. They have to have great communication skills and great computer skills and so on and so forth. Unicorns are hard to find. And when I'm looking for something, I really look, what does that position really need? If it's an accountant, I don't need him or her to be that outgoing and bubbly. I really want them sitting in front of spreadsheets and doing their job. So looking for unicorns sometimes could be problematic.
There's a famous quote that you want to always hire for the attitude and train for skill. So like the fellow panelists are saying, when you're looking for someone, the skill is not necessarily in front of you, that's okay. The attitude, which is the culture, which is the value system, is something that you want to look for. Generally speaking, the research from a financial standpoint, it is better to look within than without. But you want to make sure that they fully understand. Something that I'll encounter a lot with companies when they're bringing people in is be very transparent with what you're trying to get them into. You're not trying to sell someone a job and then switch it on them. So the people who do best when you're identifying that talent to grow them is ones that you're straightest with and you're transparent. Well, here are the things that are going to be really hard. Here are the things that you might enjoy. If they're not going to enjoy it, then you could identify the best talent in the world. They're not going to want to do it. So make sure you're just very straightforward with that as well.
Amazing, thank you. So I actually had a client who was hiring a young hotshot, and they told me they think he's going to be a rock star leader. And I was with the group of the lay leaders, the Balabatim, and I asked one of them, a prominent figure, I said, can you actually tell me why you think this person's going to be a great leader? And so that's the question for today. What are the signals that you can kind of find in a person to know that that person is not just going to be an employee, but they're really going to be a leader within the organization? Rabbi Yoni, if you could take it away.
I love people who they take the lead on things. They rise up to the occasion without being asked. To me, that is a skill that not everyone has. It involves very little ego. The word ego is not something that in my vocabulary, I hope. I mean, people who know me will validate that. But just people who just roll up their sleeves. Doesn't matter. I'll tell you, like, this happened this week, and Racheli Schwartz is here. She's my deputy chief of staff, and thank you for joining us. But we had 40 Israeli politicians that came to the OU today. We're trying to bridge the gap between the political relationships in Israel between all types of Jews. And it was a very tough week because of a lot of moving parts. But at some point, we had to move all their luggage from the OU office to the hotel down the block. And I didn't even have to, beg people to do it. There were people at the organization that we knew that we hired for that reason who just rolled up their sleeves, and people in pretty important positions, and just moved luggage in downtown Manhattan in the middle of rush hour to the hotel because that's what needed to be done. To me, that's a sign, a major sign of, like, I will roll up my sleeves. Doesn't matter if you're a CFO or you're a fellow that's just starting by us. That's a skill set that is a must for us.
Sure. In addition to what Yoni's saying, when you think of leadership and how you're looking for it, how you cultivate it, you want to tease out the difference between leadership and something like management. And management is I have all my boxes checked and I know what's going to happen and I'm moving something forward. With leadership, you want to, particularly if someone's not a leader, you want to look at how they're building relationships and how they can influence. And influence being really defined as someone that could move something without having any authority. So they don't have the power over anyone. They don't. These people who they are influencing don't report to them, yet they could still build the relationship, trust, and have them actually follow through. So the relationship building part, and are they able to influence the people around them to get things done without having any authority?
Right.
Agreed with all those points. I'll add one more. I think that in a .org nonprofit environment, the key, I referenced it earlier, I call it the commodity of relationships. It's the ability to, work hard, roll up your sleeves, lead your peers, but I think if you're really looking long term, it's somebody who can engage at the highest level in terms of the constituents you serve in your nonprofit, including the board. So I'm looking for that skill very early on. If you can't do that, you're never going to be able to rise and I think most in the room at the executive level understand that. So it's obviously not the easiest thing to tease out, but you can start to see pretty early on if people have that potential, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but you got to give people exposure to that and expose them to senior leaders and board members. But that, for me, is sort of an experience that I could tell pretty early on if they have the goods.
Amazing, thank you. Very often in human capital within nonprofits, individuals leave not necessarily for higher pay, like you mentioned, Bioni. None of us are here today because we want to make, we can all do better in the for-profit world. But many times employees leave because they feel like they're kind of capped out. There's no opportunity for them to be able to grow within their roles. So how do you create opportunities for young individuals or individuals that are earlier on in their career, maybe in general, maybe within the organization, to kind of really showcase their talent and showcase their skill set? We'll start with you, Rabbi Yaakov.
Sure. I think first you have to just be honest with yourself and your organization whether there are real pathways to leadership in a practical sense. It's nice to give someone the opportunities. We could talk about that, of owning a project, pushing things forward, but you also have to understand, are there practical limitations to it? What you would like to do, though, is when we're trying to cultivate it and you want to showcase some of that, look for projects that are just beyond the skill set of the person that you are working with. You don't want to necessarily give someone something that they can hit out of the park. You want something that they could really sink their teeth into and show that not only are they going to be able to own a project, but they're also going to, they might have to learn a new software, a new skill, a new part of the industry that they hadn't had before. And that will fulfill some of what their drive is and their purpose is, because they're learning something new and they're growing in that way without actually getting a title, and hopefully they'll accomplish as well.
And actually, just to that point, I think what you're mentioning is so important, because a lot of times when we think about workload, we're focusing on what we need to get done as opposed to growing the individuals we're doing those things with. So we'll say, I have this project executed, as opposed to, how can I turn the opportunity into something that's a growing opportunity as well? Rabioni, if you want to comment.
So I'll disagree a little bit with Yaakov, but I hear what he's saying. That's the American way of doing things. It's like, a little more than you're used to doing. I come from an Israeli background. We throw people in the deep end of the pool. And it doesn't always work out. But the ones that do, you then get the diamonds in the rough that really stand out. I mentioned before this Israeli delegation that came to our office. We gave one of our fellows the responsibility to play a quarterback. This is 40 Israelis landing on Sunday morning in Newark Airport that have to go visit Lakewood, Muncie, YU, go to Washington, D.C. for 2 days. They went to Brooklyn to meet the Syrian community. They had a packed schedule. And we had a fellow, a 22-year-old, who's here, by the way. Seth, are you here? Seth is here. Hey, Seth. So Seth is here, and he did an incredible job. we handheld him along the way, and he ran into some things that he needed help with, but we threw him in the deep end of the pool. And to me, that's how you really get the talent that you really want to step up. I will admit that at the OU, we have the luxury of retaining a lot of our superstars because of the broadness of our organization around the country, around the world. So it's a little easier for us. But there are ways for every organization, small or big, to create a plan, and it needs thought process. It's not going to happen when that person comes to you and says, I need growth or I'm leaving. And we've all had that happen to us. It needs to have a strategy behind it of like, what do I do when number 2 superstar wants to grow, but their boss is also a superstar? That happened to all of us also. So these are real life things that happen.
I should probably disagree with you, and then maybe we'll fill the room even more. But I actually do agree with really both points. I would say for a back pocket idea, I like cross-functional teams. I'm a product of cross-functional teams. I was put in to opportunities. What that means, not to sound so technical, is putting people in roles and opportunities that cross their immediate title. Don't keep people in their own silos and roles. Give them opportunities to take on projects that span the organization, even if it's not in their immediate job description. Like Yoni said, they'll lean into it. The other thing I'll say, and just write this down because it's probably the only thing I have to say of immediate value, I hope my panelists will agree. Look it up. There's a 70-20-10 rule. It was created by the Center for Creative Leadership in Greensboro, North Carolina. They're the elite leadership group in the country. I see some heads nodding. Just write it down, because if you want to learn how to be a fundraiser, 70% of that is just doing it. You can't watch videos. 10% is the learning, the reading, and 20% is mentorship. It's a pie chart. It works. It's foolproof. 70, 20, 10. 70 do, 20% mentor, 10% learn. Get the ingredients right, and you'll have success.
Amazing, thank you. So I want to take a 2-second pause before I ask the next question so that everybody really appreciates that the people on this panel are incredibly equipped for this answer, for this question, and I think we're going to gain a lot of insight. So now's the time to give full attention. So each of you in your own respective careers have managed very large teams. In fact, sometimes have even managed lots of teams of managers that have managed large teams, some thousands of employees. Can you speak about a specific project or program that you developed to mentor individuals, not necessarily to become leaders, but to really grow within their career? We'll start with Rabari.
So I had the privilege of working at the OU for 7 years and built their leadership development department. I know some of the projects still continue. One that I'm very proud of, and we may have some alumni in the room here now, is called NCSY Lead. Does it still go? Good. Excellent. It's called High Potential Program, pretty classic in corporate. Nonprofits should adopt that. It's identifying your middle management talent. I know we'll talk about succession at some point. It's your middle management team that's going to be your future. And I think it's been a transformative, I hope it still continues to be a transformative experience. Once again, I'll just repeat it, 70, 20, 10, we designed the program that way. So 70% was doing what you're doing, but we matched everyone up with mentors, and mentors in their areas. It's very important that you do have to create sort of a cohort experience. I believe that that's a way to really, and a lot of organizations do this, having a group also embeds it into the culture, but you have to keep account for what people are doing individually. So I would say the cohort model with individualized learning tracks is really the best blend in my experience.
Yaakov?
Sure. So there were two programs that we run, and they both have similar sort of approaches. When I was leading a team at Mount Sinai, and it's a very large place, right? There are 40,000 employees there between all the hospitals and clinics. And so we had a program in which we created an internal internship program. So for those of you that have larger organizations, the idea was we're such a large company that you can intern for your own company in some sort of discipline that's not your own, which we did for several years. It was very cool. We also had a high potential, what we called emerging leader program that was skill-based, and so we took a cohort through an application process and they would learn certain skills. Something that we did very purposefully, and I would encourage everyone to do this both inside your organizations but also look to outside your organizations, is just setting up meetings with not necessarily even mentors, but even lunches or coffees with people that you would want them to meet that are who you would want them to learn from. I think that the nonprofit world is mission focused, and I don't think anyone, if you reached out to a CEO or a COO of a different non-for-profit and said, I have someone who, it would be great if you just have coffee with them and talk to them about what you do, I think you'll find a lot of collaboration there. So having something formal, but also something a little more informal.
I agree with both Ari and Yaakov. The key is just to make it a priority. It's very hard not to because you become very complacent. Your people are here, they're not going anywhere, and then you wake up one morning and they all want to leave. You have to make it a priority. Something small that I created myself, it's really, really small because our HR department at the OU has really made this a priority and gotten different groups of people together to share their experiences at the OU. But about a year and a half ago, I created something called Yoni's Cronies. I'm a very big believer that the power in each department lies in the number twos, not the number ones in that department. So I got the number twos in a room together, and obviously we start off with like a half-hour venting session about our bosses, but then it tachlis of how we could help each other, and the relationships that I built with these number twos still go on, and we've created this bond with each other. So each organization is different. Just prioritize it. It's really, really important.
Amazing, thank you. Sometimes there's an emerging leader or an emerging employee that's really ready for growth within the organization. But unfortunately, the C-suite is really ran in a silo. And so somebody can work for an org for 10 or 15 years, and they've never really been involved in executive strategy or decision making. How do you include all of your employees, or the vast majority that are on a growth trajectory, into those conversations? And what are kind of some tricks that maybe we can use when doing that? We'll start with you, Rabioni.
I'm conflicted with saying that that's a skill you could learn or something that you just have and is hard to learn. Yaakov is going to yell at me saying everything is learnable. So,
As long as it's behavioral.
it's true. Again, it's very hard for me to compare the OU to other organizations, which are just massive when it comes to these things, and things that are a little more complicated in our world. I really believe in giving everyone a chance to prove themselves and getting to that next level. As long as you communicate it in very, very clear terms of what's expected. The OU in the last couple of years really entered this whole goal initiative of everyone setting goals, having benchmarks that they have to hit. And once you become clear at that and expect a certain level from your C-suite or from your higher managers, you have to hold them to that. And obviously there's help along the way, but it's just clear communication. It's that simple, I guess.
Yaakov?
Yeah, Hello? I think exposure is obviously including them in appropriate meetings is very important. Giving the room for failure, so I think is going to be important as well. Don't necessarily throw a project the first time, perhaps, at someone where there's little room for failure without support, I should add. And then again, it has a lot to do with interest. Sometimes people want to be in the room for a conversation, but don't necessarily want to execute on a project. And so giving them the exposure is very important, and just having them say, okay, so what did you learn? What did you see? What did you hear? What stuck out to you? Sometimes when they're in a meeting like that, can you see afterwards, did they understand the strategy in the room? Did you see the politics playing out? Did you understand the personalities and the sort of the power differences that are there and how that might play out afterwards? And if they got it.
The only pushback I'd have to that is that for the C-suite where you really expect a higher level of less rope, meaning like you're being paid very handsomely and you have all this years of experience and you came in with all the accolades. Am I comparing you to somebody who's like 2 years in the job market?
I was referring to someone getting exposure to those types of meetings, not necessarily who's going to be hired into the C-suite level.
So I have a little bit of a different take. C-suite, creates a hierarchy structure. So I believe that we should be thinking about our organizations as launch pads. I call it find them, grow them, keep them, launch them. Not everyone makes it to the C-suite.
Could you,
I don't know
could you
if people
repeat
know
that
this.
again? Ari, could you
Find
repeat that?
them, grow them, keep them, launch them. Not everyone is meant to be in a C-suite. You know what? There's a lot of people, and I bet, looking at the younger crowd here, honestly, they don't aspire to be. You don't have to speak out loud or nod. I don't think a lot of the next generation, we'll talk about that maybe later, I don't think they're interested in being in a C-suite, wearing a suit, going on the LIRR every day to work. So I think it's a faulty assumption. I think you want to give people the value, the exposure, the visibility. People leave bosses, not jobs. Invest in people, value them, and tell them when it's time to go. Invest in them and show them their path of where they'll succeed. I think it's a false narrative to think that everyone can fill the C-suite. And if you study, and I'm sure Yaakov sees this very often in the for-profit, we should adopt this in the nonprofit. They exit you in your third year in a law firm. They exit you in management consulting firms. You know why? Because they don't want everyone at the top of the pyramid. First of all, they don't want to pay you that much, and they want to embed you outside so you can create value for the system. Don't build a hierarchy. Build a culture that people can grow in, and when it's time, if they're ready, send them somewhere else, and let them continue to grow and be an asset for you in the future.
It's a perfect segue for our next part of the discussion in regards to retention and motivation. I think that one thing we can feel that's a burden in nonprofits specifically is it's incredibly hard to retain top talent. There is always another organization with another lay leader that's willing to cut a higher check to get your employees that have grown, especially in fundraising. And so the first question is, how do you keep high potential employees engaged when there's not so much advancement within the organization and there may not be a higher check that you could cut to them to make it more worthwhile for them?
Sure. I think what Ari referenced beforehand, if the only thing that you're relying on keeping your employees is money, then you're going to probably lose people faster than you think. You want to invest in who they are. You want to get to know them as much as you can. It used to be, 20, 30 years ago, it was all fluffy and emotional to care about your employees and really show them that. These days, people have much less of a tolerance for an organization or an atmosphere that is toxic. I mean, they're going to go very quickly. So if you can flip it, if you can understand who they are, connect with them, show that you care in all the ways that you care, in addition to trying to at least keep to an industry standard of a salary, more often than not, you'll create a good retention. And it sounds, again, fluffy, but I always tell the people that I coach, just treat them like you would treat your kids in the best possible way. You have to take care of them. Don't always expect thank yous. It's sort of something that you have to do unconditionally. You hope that it comes back, but it doesn't always.
Well, one of the things that it's important to realize is you're going to lose some people. You're going to lose people because you're a great organization. There's a lot of good people out there. I should have started by saying this, that when I've been in the nonprofit world for about 25, 26 years. I was at the tail end where it was like the perception was if you can't really hold a real job, you go into the nonprofit world, they'll be like, they'll take care of you. That's not the case anymore. The superstars in the Jewish world are working for the nonprofit, and a lot of them are getting paid handsomely. The world is completely different than it was before. So to retain such people is going to be hard. To me, it's shared values. I already mentioned it to start off. You got to make sure that you connect with them. It's also understanding where they're coming from. When I sit down with employees who are thinking about leaving because they see the growth is maybe not there and their boss is a superstar and whatever the reason may be, when I sit down with them and talk to them a little more about, what could we do to keep you? I understand that praise and, flexibility to schedule doesn't pay your Con Ed bill. I get that. But sometimes just going for another $10,000, $15,000 when you look at the numbers and working through the process with them, I've seen that help a lot. I cannot tell you how many people left the OU and YU when I was working there and then came back a couple of years later because no one coached them. No one worked through the process of like going to another place and the commute, and it costs money to go to this commute, and then you have to hire babysitters because you're not as available because these two organizations were more flexible with your time. So having that conversation, showing that you care about them as people is one of the key ways of retaining people.
I don't believe anyone ever leaves. That's my philosophy. If you leave, it's because you have other opportunities and we'll help you get there. First of all, the research backs this up. 50%, no one's leaving because of money. So just know that. Put that in your back pocket. If people do, they have to, and you'll wish them well. No one ever leaves. 50%. The statistics show, meaning like it's a good point. Meaning, in terms of indicators, lead indicators, you're thinking it's 90% they're going to leave if you're not going to give them a couple of bucks. It's just not true, and we can go deeper on some of those. I'm glad to talk about it offline. But bottom line is, invest in your people, show them the value, invest in them, get them coaching, get them mentoring. You were talking about limited resources. There's ways of investing in people that are not costly. Flexibility schedules now, as we all know, go a long way. But don't think of it as leaving. You only just pointed it out. People come back. They want to stay connected. It works in nonprofit. We're mission-centered. Put them on your board. Involve them, connect to them. And one other trick to put in your other back pocket is, guess where all your talent comes from? It always comes from previous staff. So how you exit them will manifest itself in terms of what comes back to you. Source your talent through your people and source your talent through your alumni. LinkedIn has done a lot of research on this, and there's a great book called The Alliance. I recommend everyone to read it. It's all about alumni networks. No one ever leaves, at least not in my book. No one ever leaves an organization that I'm ever part of. Relationships carry forever.
I just want to add, it's the people, I think that you mentioned this, Ari, and it's an important point from an attention standpoint. The people who leave are the people who are good. The people who are your low performers are very happy staying and doing a bad job. So the people that leave are the ones who have opportunity and could find. So usually, like you might find in any situation, our attention is usually pulled to fighting the fire, dealing with the employee who's not doing a good job, if you have a formal plan to do that or not, but usually all we have to deal with them, hold them accountable. And so naturally, we're not paying attention to the people who are actually doing a good job. They're the first ones that are going to go. So just make sure, like they're saying up here, if you don't have an active plan to do this, it simply won't happen on its own.
Can I just say that that's such an important point that was just made. We're talking very aspirationally about the leaders. There's a lot of other employees who maybe shouldn't even be there either that you should also be paying attention to. And it's part of a whole system and culture that you have to create. Don't let people just stick around because they have nothing else to do. That's not healthy either. And by the way, the people that are leaving because of that. They don't want to be part of an organization that's lackluster. They don't want to be around people who are just showing up late and not working hard. So look at this holistically, and I think that distinction is huge.
Two actual just interesting points on that. I was actually once speaking at a conference, and I'm not going to ask this question to everybody here today because some people might be here with their employees. And somebody asked, how do I retain this high-level employee? They're asking for, an extra, large sum of money. And I said to them, you've already arrived at this point, but let me ask you a question. When you were trying to hire them, would you have spent an extra $20K on the hire? Like if they were asking for, $100,000, and you can only go 80, would you have done it to hire this individual at the time? And everybody in the room said, yeah, 100%, especially people hiring fundraisers. They all said it. And I said, okay, great. How long has the employee been with you? And he said 5 years. And I said, how much money did you invest into his personal growth? Coaching, hiring people to train, sending him to seminars, making sure he paid full price for .org. And inevitably, every single person there at that particular conference actually said that they didn't spend a single penny. So we're willing to invest monetarily often to a certain extent, but we're not willing to put the money towards growing that individual. What are some of examples that maybe you can give, and we'll start with you, Rabari, of incentives that you've actually used to help the employee either grow or want to stay within the organization that didn't really cost money, or it didn't really mean that you were having to invest on his bottom line paycheck?
So one of my favorite projects, I actually just saw a former colleague this morning who's in the room. I won't embarrass her or him. I launched it at the OU. It's called the Request for Growth. All of you are nonprofit leaders. RFPs, requests for proposals, are common. So we introduced a program called the RFG, Request for Growth. What do you want to do? How do you want to grow? But by the way, what are you investing in your own growth? Not just financially, time. Are you willing to put time in, energy in? We'll split it. You want to join a gym? Good, we'll split it. Very low cost. You want to learn to be a better speaker? We'll hook you up with a coach. We'll make it happen. There are ways of investing in people, but invest in them in the way that they see value, not in what you see value. It has to be a joint effort. But that's an example of something that we initiated, and it took off, and everyone leaned in and shared with us what they wanted to do. Interestingly, sometimes when you do something like that, you actually start to see who's real and who's not. We talked a lot about those who initiate, those who follow through, conscientiousness. Let me tell you something, the RFG exposed everything, because people think they want to do things, but then they actually have to do the work. When you actually have to go to the gym and work out, and you have to report back to me on how it went, let's see how that goes. So we set it up. We actually had lay leaders, overseeing it. So it was a blind process. We didn't see the names of the employee. We just said, you tell us if you think this is a valuable proposition, and then we invested. It was a few $100s each. It worked out really, really well.
The easy things that we put in place is obviously flexibility. Sometimes that is even more valuable than money to some employees, about having a flexible schedule, different working hours. I realize that could create havoc in an organization when you pick and choose who you do that for, but if it allows it, I think COVID has sort of allowed us to work in that model, with Zoom being a real part of life. So that's really, really worked for us. Professional development, growth, skills, and growth in skills is something that a lot of employees would stay in a place like the OU because we invest in them. A big shout out to my fellowship in the back over there, who the OU created a executive fellowship for college graduates to get them into the to the nonprofit world, and Baruch Hashem, a lot of them are staying in the nonprofit world. So it's a very successful program. But when they feel like they're a part of a family, many times that really stays. So those are the really, really basics. But again, every organization has to look at it differently based on what their resources are.
I'll give you an example. I've done it with my team, and I've used it with the companies that I consult for. It's really cheap. Have a one-on-one book club. So if you have an employee or a team, depends on how much time you want to invest, have them or yourself choose some sort of professional leadership skill type of book, in the same way that a group will go through a book club a couple of chapters at a time and discuss. You could choose any book. There's a million leadership books out there. There's a million self-help type of growth books around professionalism, and say part of our check-in that besides for running through the projects, we're going to take a chapter, read it together, discuss how we could practically apply this to our organization. I have found both with the people that I lead as well as the people that I consult for, everyone loves the idea and it works very well all the time.
Amazing. We're going to do one more question and then open the floor for Q&A. So recently, Warren Buffett obviously announced that he'll be stepping down as CEO. Unfortunately, he did not pick any of us on the panel.
I'm not available.
Yeah, we're unavailable. The OU has told Yoni he cannot take the job.
If you want, I could coach you, Yoni, for the position.
I think something with nonprofits that's very different than the for-profit world is very often, and I'm sure people in this room can attest to this, nonprofits are started as passion projects. And so people feel incredibly emotionally attached to the things that they do. It's not a healthcare company that if you do well enough, you're happy to stop working day to day and sell. How do you deal with succession in a healthy way to make sure that there's really a game plan, whether it's a full succession of an entire person and role, or whether it's just parts, saying, you know what, you've been the CEO, you've been doing this for 10 years, you don't really need to do these 5 items every single day. How do you do that? And we'll start with you, Yaakov.
Sure. This runs sort of 2 separate ways. Succession, so it's the answer that no one wants to hear, which is always depends. And how much of this is a family business versus not? And I say that both from either it could be a yeshiva, it could be an organization that was started by a family. Succession planning looks very, very different in an organization that's family run than not family run. Usually, if it's family run, I guess everyone knows who's going to have that succession plan, typically down to one of the children. Whether or not that's the best move is certainly up for debate between each organization. When it's not, then it really depends. These days I have found that I have a handful of non-for-profit clients. Most of my clients are for-profit. But I have seen non-for-profit, the direction has become a lot more strategic. It's become a lot more goal-oriented, like Yoni was saying before. These are plans that in the past a non-for-profit wouldn't have in place. There are metrics, there's KPIs. And so really understanding either who from the inside or who from the outside can take you to where your goals are set. So if you want to plan from a succession standpoint, know where you want to go before you decide who's going to be put in there.
It's hard. Successful planning is very hard because it involves no ego. When you have a department director who's very, very valuable to the organization, you can't just walk up to him and say, when you are ready to leave, who's going to take over for you? That's not a normal conversation to have with somebody, but that department director or that leader has to have that as part of their mandate to make sure that their work continues afterwards. We actually had a crazy situation at the OU. We had an HR director, chief of human resources, and it was there for about 25 years. Excellent individual, really created a great HR office. I've never seen anyone have a tough conversation as well as he have. And you have to have tough conversations sometimes. So he was fantastic. But we wanted to introduce new things to the OU, professional development and growth and things that an old school type of HR directors may not be in his lingo. And we tried to push, we tried to do it. It worked a little bit, but he actually came over to the leadership of the OU and said, I want to swap positions with my number 2, because my number 2 is this young, vibrant, out-of-the-box thinker. And I have something to still give, and I want to do it because it's what the organization needs right now. And that was his succession planning from the beginning. He groomed this number 2 for about 7-8 years, and that person took over as number 1 now, and it's been a success story. I understand that that's like it doesn't happen on every other day, but succession planning is hard. Very seldomly can you replace a 1-for-1. Sometimes it's okay to have a 1-for-3 type of succession plan until you can figure it out. We have one of our departments, JLIC, which is on campus couples that over 30 campuses in America, 10 in Israel, and it's going really, really well. We have a department director who's amazing, and in the back room, we sometimes, over some scotch and cigars, we think about what would happen if I say this person got hit by a bus, but other people would say it differently. But we would say, okay, he has 3 great number 2s who could fill in the meantime. Is that a succession plan? Maybe temporarily a Band-Aid, but a real succession plan with details in it takes a lot of thought process, coordination, and tough conversations.
Success and succession go hand to hand. You're all in this room, I'm sure, leading very important organizations. I imagine your organizations are all running very well right now. We have to be able to anticipate and to think what would happen if we're not there, and if things are not working because you're not there, so that's a problem. Try to create, it's not about making yourself irrelevant, it's about creating an infrastructure that will last, and I'm sure my fellow panelists can attest to it. I've seen many organizations that just had a good run, and they didn't really plan for this, and they're no longer. And they had acronyms and names, and honestly, even conferences like this that used to be the premier .org of its day, I won't call them out, some of you in the room can probably attest to that, they are no longer. And the reason is they had no succession. The entire initiative lived and died in one person's idea and vision. God willing, for .org, I hope you have many more years of success, but it's only going to happen by creating that succession. So don't think of it in a morbid way or in a existential way. Just be very practical. Your institution will not succeed if you don't plan for it. And by the way, I don't think that Berkshire Hathaway did it very well. Warren Buffett is about 90-something years old. So in all fact, he probably should have stepped down. I think he's sort of phased out already. I don't think that that's a success story. I think that that's just, probably the shareholders, asserting pressure and influence. I actually think that's not a good case. So don't follow Warren Buffett for that. Follow his investment advice, but not his succession. But in all seriousness, the .org, test will be the test of all our organizations. How do you continue to grow and expand and live beyond yourself? That's what it's all about. That's what legacy is all about. That's what we're all about in terms of our mission. So, let's get over our ego and let's just do it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I know we have, I was told 5 minutes, we're going to give 7, and then they won't let me come back into the room. If anybody has any questions they'd like, I can pass around the mic if you'd like, if you want to maybe stand up. You got a mic? You'll run it?
One of the things you had mentioned was that you have to have no ego. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of a little bit, in some organizations it's fantastic, there's really no ego there. Very often, people are in either the C-suite on the internal side or they're externally, board of directors, whatever it is, there's external pressures. People have egos. So if you're an employee looking to grow and there are people who have real egos there, what is the employee supposed to do about it? Because I don't think telling the people who have the egos that they shouldn't have it is going to work. I think you always have to look at the total employee. I always tell my colleagues that once the negative in the person outweighs the positive, it's time to go. So a person's allowed to have an ego. If they're successful in what they're doing and it gets to their heads, they're going to have an ego. I'm a very big believer in transparency and real conversations. Many times we skirt around the issue because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or things like that. But God knows at the OU we have people with massive egos, and we deal with it. We sit down and have the conversation of that. It's just showcasing yourself as like a person who's very shallow, a person who's just doesn't care about cholesterol, cares about themselves more. And it resonates if you have the real conversation. That's what I've found out.
Can I add something? Organizations, we don't work for organizations. We work with people towards a mission. If somebody, let's say if you're mentoring someone or if it's you that you're asking about, so find different people to hang out with. And if they're not in the organization, find them outside. And if they're not in the organization or outside, find somewhere else to go. You cannot succeed and thrive. It's not about the organization. An organization is not defined by those egos. If that is the organizational culture, first of all, I wouldn't believe that everybody was in that category. So find someone else. I work in a large company organization. There's parts of my own organization I wouldn't want to work for based on ego. So I don't work with them. I find my way. So that's how I lead my life. Organizations are made up of people, but they don't define us.
I'd also just add to that, and then we'll take two more questions. I think one thing that my brother's a brilliant businessman once shared with me is you have to identify what the agenda is, what he calls the nikuda pinimi. What's like the root source agenda that's taking place. Very often we get caught up on the emotional side effects, but if we dig deep at what does the person actually want, maybe it's manifesting in ego, maybe it's manifesting in being aggressive, maybe they're being too passive and not providing enough vision, but if you can identify with the root agenda, meaning what's the goal, what's the thing we want to achieve, if you identify with that, so long as you can handle what may become toxicity, you can continue to grow, and I think that you'll have a lot of success. If you can't identify with that root agenda, or it's so overpowering that the risk over reward becomes very, very clear that there's more risk than reward, then obviously you have to make a decision to move somewhere else. Any
So I joined my organization because they were most aligned with the mission that I wanted to follow through with. And it's been phenomenal, and they've been investing in me, and I certainly see a lot of potential to drive the impact that I wish to see in the world. Having said that, I do foresee a time will come where my particular goals and vision are somewhat misaligned with theirs. And whilst currently I am certainly moving towards that, at what point should I identify some key indicators, and what would those key indicators be, whether it's time to grind my feet in and really push the organization in a certain direction and see where that goes, or to branch out and create a new sister sort of organization that is more aligned with the vision that I believe will be most successful.
Sure, I'll start, but I feel like this is a question for Yoni. I think that if you're working for an organization and they have a certain vision and purpose, then I would say that's where it's going. And it's not necessarily your prerogative to change the direction that the organization's going, just to be clear. I would also have some very open and honest conversations, and ultimately you'll have to come to a decision point that if they're going in a direction that you disagree with, that is what they're allowed to do, and if that's something that you're not aligned with and you would like to go somewhere else, that's a choice you have as well.
Certainly. The only reason why that question arises is because when they first hired me, they were essentially making promises about how they believed in my vision and how they wanted to take on those ideas, and they thought it was valuable. It's just there's still bureaucracy and layers and hierarchies, and ultimately that's
I just want to reinforce something I said maybe 20 minutes ago, that when you are hiring people for your organization, there is no better favor you could do for yourselves or for them is to be as transparent as possible about what you would want them to do in reality, not what you hope for them to do in 2 years from now. But when they step into the organization and in the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, where do you feel they are going to work and what are they going to accomplish? And then say there is a chance that something might change in the future, but right now this is where we are.
Yeah, I totally agree. Organizations pivot all the time. They have to, right? It's the Kodak model of if you don't keep on innovating and pivoting, you're just going to die. And organizations pivot, and you have to have certain values that you believe in, that it's a red line. Like, I'm not going to cross these. I'm flexible on almost anything else, but these type of things. I can't tell you what yours are. I know what mine are. And once that becomes apparent that a line or a value is not important anymore, the safest thing and smartest thing to do is, you get up and leave. It's best for you. It's best for the organization. No one wants someone disgruntled. And if you've networked, which is what these great conferences are about, networked enough, you pick up the phone, you call 5 people, and you'll have a job in very soon. But that's, to me, the red line is the important thing.
Thank you.
We're going to take just one more question, and then we'll end off. Any remaining questions from Reb Chaim?
Thank you, panelists and moderator. Wonderful. I'm hearing a lot of great examples from very large established organizations, specifically when it comes to talent development, building within, Cohen's cronies, I forgot the name exactly. Could Can you talk a little bit about what a young organization theoretically could do? Is it too early to start thinking about those things or establish actual structures in place early on because you're just focusing on getting the ship in order and meeting the needs of your constituents, or can you already start early on with that as well?
There's a client of mine that's a non-for-profit that is 18 months old, maybe 20 months old. And they brought me on before they launched because they were having some trouble. And we established so many things early on. Just because you have a structure, right? When you're young, an organization of 3 people and you're trying to accomplish something, if you have it's like the example of the rocket ship type of thing, right? If you're a centimeter off now, by the time you look 5-6 years from now, you'll be miles away. You don't have to be perfect with it. You don't have to be vigilant. They can't bend the rules sometimes, but have a mahalach in which you want to follow, in which you're identifying and looking to try to develop, because way before, Mirz Hashem, before you know it, things will have to be delegated to people that you need to trust, who understand what you're trying to accomplish and have the skills that you need them to have. And things are always, as I'm sure a lot of you can attest, come from unexpected sources. You could be thinking that you're going over here and this is the type of funding that you're getting, or this is the population that you're hitting, and all of a sudden an opportunity comes that you didn't consider, or a funding opportunity comes with strings attached that I'll give you this money if you do this thing. And you're like, well, I don't have the people for that. I didn't realize I wanted to do it. I'd be okay with doing it, but who and how? So I would start, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I would start early.
Go ahead. Every organization has assets and everyone has strengths. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. If you're big like the OU, you have resources, you're global. If you're a small organization, you have warmth, you have the interpersonal skill, relationships that you can't have in a big place. So first identify who you are, what resources you have, what strengths you have that others don't have, and build on it, and invest. Make sure the people that you want to feel that you're investing in them. That'll take you a long way.
I think you're so lucky. When you're part of a big organization that's been around, it's really hard to sometimes reverse course and to put money into a budget. It's been accounted for 20 times over. When you're a startup, anyone that's working in an organization that has a smaller, more intimate environment, you get the benefit as the leader to actually embed all these ideas. And as you've heard from this panel, and glad to talk offline, it's not the expense of it, it's the intentionality of it. And maybe just to kind of go back to that to bring us full circle, hiring a talent is not a job function. It's a culture, it's a strategy, it's every single day, and that's why a lot of people aren't really good at it, because it's really hard. And you have to be thinking about it all the time, and you have to be looking at all your employees all the time. So yeah, when you have 1,000 employees, so guess what? That's really hard. When you have 7 in a room, there's no C-suite. You don't have to worry, how am I going to expose them to my senior leadership? How am I going to make sure that the values are aligned? Guess what? All the values and all the people are in the room. So I actually think you're lucky.
I came here to this conference with a mission. My mission is really to relate to everybody that we have to, as a group, because we're all in the same boat, build a pipeline of young, talented professionals to get into the workforce. There are hundreds of YU, Touro, Excelsior, base measure students that are looking for summer internships, and that's where it starts. And if any organization, any school could start something to get a couple of people in, and that's where it begins. We need to tap the brightest and the youngest and the smartest of the next generation into this world. They are there, they're hungry for it, but it does require us to make it a priority. So the OU is 100% behind it. We're investing a lot of money into that. YU is joining, also other organizations joining as well. We have to get that talent pool up because we need it for Klal Yisrael.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and such an important message. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you, everyone. Just on a small note, we're going to be starting another panel in just about 3 minutes, so if you want to stay or leave. And then also, I think it's important for myself to mention, the panelists are available for conversations and to be reached out to. We are very lucky to have heard from them today. Keep up the relationship.